Welcome everybody, my name is John Wally and today we're going to be covering a whole new piece of building our own web server. It's a part of a series that we had done previously. We're adding a part 8 and this whole section is about how to disable older versions of SSL or TLS. It's something I ran across in a scan provided by Qualys where they'll do an open, basically free check against your SSL certificates in TLS and give you kind of a rating around that. So we're going to go into this and we'll start looking at what is the current status of our SSL certificates or our TLS protocols. Is there anything weak in there and how can we fix that? So let's go ahead and jump in. All right, let's get started with going to the Qualys SSL Labs. If you go out to sslabs.com, SSL test, you'll be able to test your domain. So here I'm going to use my domain and we can go out and look at what our results are. So if we just put in, for instance, johnwally.com and we hit submit, the site will run through several checks to kind of find out what the weaknesses are and what's actually running. We'll skip through this really quick for the video purposes, but this typically takes somewhere between 60 seconds and maybe 2 minutes, depending on the site and the connectivity and that sort of stuff. All right, so it looks like it's all complete. Let's talk a little bit about what this report says. So first of all, we'll see that we have an overall rating of B. Now yours may be something different from that. I've already done a little bit of hardening on this compared to where we were at first, but we want this score to jump up to an A status for our overall rating. So as we look at the bottom of this, or the bottom of this little area where we see what our score is, you're going to see that this server supports TLS 1.1. Yours may say that it supports TLS 1, TLS 1.1. It may even say that it supports SSL version 3. But here it'll tell you what the weaknesses are. There's a good mark here saying that we also support 1.3, which is good. So how do we fix this? How do we make sure that we go here and we can get into this A status so we're no longer using these weak SSL certificates or weak, not necessarily certificates, but these protocols to securely encrypt our communications? So I'm going to go to the command prompt real quick, and we'll start working on our server. All right, so the first thing I want to do is log into my server. So I have a script to do this. All right, now that we're logged into our server, we want to go out and make sure that we have updates. So the first thing we want to do is a sudo apt update and see if we have any pending updates out there that we need to install. All right, it looks like we're all up to date. If we're not up to date, one of the things that you'll want to do is do an update and an upgrade. Now we're not installing any packages today, we're just doing configuration changes, but it's good to know that as we go through this, every time we touch our box, we should be updating before we make any real changes. All right, so the very first thing is we want to make some changes around some of the mods that Apache uses. So the way we do that is we want to actually go into the etc Apache 2 folder. So we're going to switch directories over here. We're going to say cd etc, and then we're going to go to Apache 2. And what you'll see in this folder is we have several different things here, but we'll have mods enabled and we'll also have mods available. So we want to go into the mods available folder. So we're going to say cd and then we're going to say mods available, and we can look in here. Now there's a lot of files in here, but there's only one that we really care about, and this is that ssl.config file. We're going to have to modify this and add a few things into this file to make sure that we're not accepting weaker forms of encryption or that we're not using protocols that are basically end of life and we shouldn't be used anymore because they're insecure. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to sudo, because you have to have root privileges to edit these files. And I'm going to say vim. You can use nano or any other kind of tool that you like out there for editing, gedit or so on and so forth. In this case, I'm going to use vim. So I'm going to say sudo vim, and then I'm going to actually say that I want to do the ssl.conf file. All right. So vim helps out a little bit because a lot of this is color coded, but as we go through here, it's not a very big file, but we want to make sure that we change a few key settings here. So the first one that we want to do is you'll see this SSL cipher. And we want to add a few things to this. Right now we're already set for high, and we already have a null setting in, so that it's not allowed to have just a null certificate in here, that we have to have some kind of cipher. We also want to add a couple of more things. So the first thing I want to do is say, hey, I don't want to allow, which is my exclamation point, I don't want to use MD5, because we know that MD5 has a really weak collision space, and it's really easy to guess for systems now in MD5, so we don't want to use that. And the second one is 3DES, and for the same reasons. It's just a weak form of encryption. So, and we don't want to say, we want to make sure we put that exclamation in front of that, just like that. So that's the first setting that we're going to change. So now we're not going to accept any MD5, 3DES, or null cipher types, and we want to stay with a high configuration. The second thing that we want to do is, you'll see an SSL protocol. The SSL protocol says here that we're allowing all SSL protocols with the exception of minus SSL version 3 and TLS version 1. Well, we want to add to this. We want to say also, we're not going to, we'll say negative, because we're not going to allow TLS. And then we're going to say V for version 1.1. And we can also say 1.2. Now, a lot of systems still use 1.2, so I wouldn't do that right now. We can stick with 1.2 and 1.3 and be fairly secure. If you're just paranoid, you can always add a version 1.2 as well, but I'll tell you that you might end up having problems with people connecting if you're not allowing the 1.2 in there. It just hasn't been long enough for people to move over to 1.3 yet. It's pretty straightforward. That's the only changes I'm going to make. I'll quit out of this and I'm going to save it. And then that's our first configuration change that we need to make. Now that's not the only one. Now if you're running on your own certificates and you installed them and you did all that under Apache and you didn't have anything automated, you're done. You just restart Apache and you're good to go. It'll move that into the mods enabled and you're all set. Unfortunately, because we used Let's Encrypt in our build, there is a second piece that we need to install or that we need to change in the configuration. One of the big reasons for that is because we automated that process under how we do our certificates. So what ends up happening is our scripts will overwrite what we just did if we don't go and change it in another place. So that isn't actually the Let's Encrypt file or folder. So what we're going to do is we're going to cd over to etc and Let's Encrypt. And what you'll see in this file is an options-ssl apache.conf. And that file we want to make changes as well, and we need to do that as root. So we're going to sudo, and I'm going to vim options apache ssl apache conf. And what you'll see here is a very similar thing to what we saw in the other one. We're saying, hey, we're going to change the SSL protocol and the SSL cipher suite. So in SSL protocol, you'll see that we have all, then we have SSL version 2, version 3, and TLS 1. We want to add to this the same way. So we're going to say I, and we're going to go in and make the change here. So we'll say TLS version 1.1. Now we could do the same thing again and say we don't want to have 1.2, but it will break a lot of stuff. We're just not quite there yet. So the next thing we want to do is we want to go change what kind of cipher suite we're using. We did this before in our previous configuration, and we want to do the same thing here. So what I'll do is I'll just add my 3DES and my MD5 to the end of this file as well. So you'll see I'm already saying no DSS. Then I'm going to say no MD5. And I will say no 3DES to the end of this so that we don't have those weak encryptions going on here. I'll escape, write and quit to my file. And so that's saved as well. Now all we have to do now is just restart Apache. So I'm going to say sudo system control, we'll say restart Apache 2. Oops. Didn't mean to capitalize that. All right, so now what should happen is we should have a good SSL certificate out there. So let's bring our browser back up. And now we're at a B. You can reset this by just clearing the cache and it'll rerun again. So let's do that. This will take a few minutes. I'll fast forward through this one as well so that you can see the result. Excellent, there we go. Now we have our overall A rating. It looks like we're fairly locked down. Our cipher strengths are pretty good. Our key exchange is good. Protocol support and our certificate. So we're all set with our A rating. All right, hopefully this episode on disabling versions of SSL and TLS has been helpful. If it has, please hit that like button. And as always, if you hit the subscribe and the bell, you'll always be notified when we put new videos out there. Thank you and have a great day.